This is for the recording, this is the October 3, 2025 meeting of the Economic Development Commission. I note that we do have a quorum, and I will therefore call the meeting to order. And other than the welcome, I just wanted to have one item for your agenda, and that is that Sean has confirmed that our December meeting will be at the high school with the CTE program folks, and we'll start at 8 o'clock to accommodate their schedule. So please set aside 8 to 9:30, and hopefully everybody will be able to stay through it. As always, it will be an interesting meeting.
December 5th, right, Tom?
Yes. Correct. All right. Next, I would entertain a motion to approve the draft minutes from our September 5 meeting.
So moved.
Bob, do we hear a second?
Second.
Second by Anna. Okay, any corrections or deletions, additions? Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. All right, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Just some general comments. We're into our, as you know, our fall cadence with multiple festivals on the weekends. Businesses are focused on finishing the calendar year strong. And if you haven't noticed, we're in a bit of a construction sprint out there, sprint to winter. A lot of things going on. Still getting inquiries into my office regarding opening restaurants, opening retail shops. There's a grand opening for Albany International, their office on Pease. That's on October 16th. That's attending. Monitoring issues at the state level. I sent an article around. I think I sent a copy to the group. If not, I can, regarding state revenues, which have been continuing to go down and applying pressure to other areas. If you didn't see the headline, the Commissioner of the BEA, Business and Economic Affairs, Taylor Caswell, has resigned. So he was a good champion certainly for tourism and attracting visitors. So we'll see how that plays out. And I'll be attending a conference at the end of the month for the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute. Again, just trying to understand those bigger issues that are going to affect our businesses here in Portsmouth. I attended a management leadership conference yesterday that UNH put on. A lot of AI conversation, and just a couple things I want to share. I'm still processing because I got lots of notes, but this AI expert, if you will, talked about viewing AI as a utility, not just as a tool. Like, you don't have a choice whether to grab the tool and use it. It's going to be there. So from a management and leadership and business standpoint, you really need to come to grips with that. That was his message to us. And the other piece was that the opportunities is a 40% savings in time if you deploy AI and people are competent with it, and a 10% or 18% increase in quality. That's kind of what's on the table. That was the message to the leaders in the audience. So I'll leave it there. If you want to talk about any of these topics and more, please give me a call and I'll fill in more details. Thanks, Tom.
Any questions of Sean? Okay. I'll probably give you a call. I'd be interested in knowing if that conference discussed, job dislocations, impact on the greater economy. All right. Next, we have one of our two big items today, which is the Social District Working Group recommendations for a report out to City Council, and I'll let our chair of that group, Ann, take us through it. Presumably, you all received the preliminary draft that was sent out late yesterday afternoon and had a chance to review it. I'm going to ask Ann to kind of go over the background and getting to that point in a little more detail.
I want to start by saying this is a very drafty draft. Because I'm still not quite sure what question we're answering to the council, since they have now already voted to put this on the ballot. So us recommending to put that on the ballot, that ship has sailed, it's on the ballot. So I started to put this together with a little bit of input from a few people on city staff. When I discussed it with them, they felt like voters were not informed well enough about what a social district might look like here in Portsmouth, and that perhaps some information tilted towards voters rather than council might be helpful. Now, I could be all wet on that. Maybe this is really council, so I'm looking to you all to help me out on that. So I started out by reiterating what we talked about last month of who we've spoken to and kind of a little bit what they've told us, that we've spoken to the Liquor Commission, the primary sponsor, Bill Boyd, the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association, and Fire Chief Bill McQuillan. And then since last month, the Chamber has ever so kindly sent a short survey around to downtown businesses, all businesses, not just restaurants, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. To get a little bit of feel from how the business community was feeling about it, which we'll go through this and then we'll go back to Ben for him to talk about the business community. From that, we then, I think again, Ben talked to some towns and cities in other states that have had social districts or have social districts to get their feedback. And I've had a number of conversations with John Gollum, who lives inside the social district in Savannah, Georgia, and was, I don't know how many years, owner of Poco's, 32 or something like that, and was on the police commission here. So he has a pretty unique perspective on looking at things that impact downtowns with restaurants and alcohol. And then we went on to make some suggestions, almost like if this is passed, perhaps the EDC, and maybe we need to put this in here, the EDC, I believe, would be open to the idea of stepping up. If this was passed, we could step up in the same way that we did for outdoor dining and come back with some suggestions for best practices to bring that back to the council, because the council is who would set the rules and regs on how a social district would work here. Once the rules and regs are set by the Liquor Commission, we'd be working inside of their rules and regs. The Liquor Commission still has not, as far as I know, has not set their rules and regs. So we're going into a voting season without actually knowing what the rules are on what we're voting on. That's what makes it hard for me to come up with a really solid recommendation from the EDC. But let me throw this to Ben for the survey from the businesses, for him to give us a quick little walk through that.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. We did survey within our memberships, best we can do. It's the list we have to work with. Any downtown businesses, we had a decent response rate. There was maybe 40 or 45 businesses that responded to the survey. Surprisingly to me, I'll say the first thing I noticed was they were all familiar with the concept of a social district. 82% were at least, and that was a high number for me. I expected there to be a lot less known about it. And then from there, the results were very mixed. People are sort of all over the page on it, so to speak, and with maybe a slight lean towards they could be a positive influence to downtown. But there's a number of concerns, particularly around safety, atmosphere, trash, litter. Those sort of concerns were prevalent. There was a lot. You can imagine if you run like a financial planning company downtown or some sort of business service or some sort of service, most of them were like, this really isn't going to impact me. Like Novacure said, I don't think it's going to really impact me unless, we're having all day parties on Vaughan Mall. That's the sort of response that we got from a lot of businesses. So I think you have a copy of the survey results or some of the open-ended questions. I'm happy to share anything with you. But the public safety and cleanliness concerns were definitely the biggest ones that came to mind. While I just have the floor, if I may, the Chamber Board discussed this at our last meeting and had a very robust conversation about it and trying to decide what our opinion as an organization should be about it. And quite frankly, there's a few restaurateurs in the room. And to Ann's point earlier about, if this does move forward, the EDC could fulfill a role similar to outdoor dining. They were very, very passionate about the fact that there needed to be strong participation in that conversation from the restaurant community and the folks that are serving the alcohol, because it really will land a lot on their plate. And they felt like if this was going to move forward in the city, they needed to have a strong presence at the table and be part of that conversation. So I just wanted to share that with this group. So if and when that time comes, that we make sure we have a intentional plan to engage them in the conversation. And I think that's pretty fair. So I don't know if folks have questions on survey results or anything like that. I'm happy to answer it, but it was very mixed and maybe with a slight lean towards the positive.
Question, okay?
Comments about what you might think city council is looking for from us? Since we have
Comment
two
from me.
counselors in the room.
I think it was premature to ask the EDC to put recommendations. I think one of the things also we discussed at the city council meeting was if this passes, then we create a committee. I said at the council meeting, I'll reconfirm here, the reason I supported it going on the ballot is I think anything that can go on the ballot should go on the ballot. It was the bill was written that way to go on the ballot to give the municipality a choice. I think that what I've expressed to people that have talked about it, we are deciding if we want to explore a concept or not. The city wants we get more affirmative understanding from the Liquor Commission, but as it's kind of written now, interpreted by Attorney Farini, is that we can control a lot of how this goes, when it happens, where it happens, those basics. So that could mean potentially a policy that says just on certain days that we already have, say, people downtown or X, Y, and Z, very limited locations. But for me, it is more like giving the voters in the residents the idea: do you like this concept or not? Because my concern is that if we waited, say, 2 years. To put this on the ballot and spent 2 years of potentially doing all of this work, and then it was voted down on the ballot, versus putting it on the ballot as a concept. Do you like would you like a social district in our community or not? And then we can kind of, as a community, if the answer is yes, then work through kind of different options. So I personally think it was a little premature to ask the, and I know that Tom, when we spoke about this months ago, we were kind of like, well, we'll do a little research on the other communities, what they do. It was interesting to see that somebody listed Nashville in here, which Nashville does not have. They're just a rowdy city that now shuts down their. But we're never going to be in Nashville.
So you can't walk around with a drink in
You
Nashville.
cannot walk around and drink in
My
Nashville.
bad, we can take
No,
that
you're
off.
fine. You're
So
fine.
between buildings, though.
I know. You walk. It's not a far walk from one place to another.
Right.
But you gotta leave your drink behind.
You gotta leave your drink behind. But I was just saying, and I said at the council meeting, my husband and I were actually just in Savannah the 2 weekends ago for a very quick weekend. And he had never been there. I've been there probably over a dozen times because I have friends that live there. And it was funny, within the first 24 hours, the next day, he said, we didn't even get a to-go drink. So he like this thing he was all excited about. He's like, we didn't even think about it because we were just walking around and hanging out and sitting in restaurants. So, and I've been to a couple other places like Memphis and some of the other smaller communities that kind of do it. But I'm neither here nor there on it. I'm like, let's give everyone the opinion at the ballot.
Well, I guess our question is though,
Yeah.
we've been instructed by the mayor to come back to
Yeah.
council. What is council looking for?
Well, I think the mayor made that instruction, so I think that would be the question for the mayor. But I think what was put together of the survey and submitting that to the council and maybe just advising the council that we wait until see what the ballot says and then we put together a working group, but maybe led by the EDC and have community members and.
I would almost expect it to be like a blue ribbon committee.
Yeah, I mean that's what we've.
With a member from the EDC representing.
That's what we've kind of discussed amongst ourselves is that if this passes on the ballot, then there should be a committee started to
So
work
maybe
through
that's
the
part of our
process.
recommendation.
Yeah, I think
That
that's
if
great.
it passes, we recommend that the mayor appoint a blue ribbon committee and include the EDC as
Yeah.
part of it, as
I would assume
mean,
you'd
is
have
that
the
the sort of-
EDC, someone from the fire department, someone from the police department, from or somewhere.
It's the same group as outdoor dining,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah,
But also a good representation from the restaurant community.
yeah, and I also think from the resident community and the retail community, I think it needs to
Business community.
the business community. I think it needs to be broad because there are conversations of if it is allowed, which it does seem to be allowed in the law as written. Maybe there's a West End district, maybe there's a downtown district. So I think that the net, once the liquor commission kind of figures out how they want to handle this, and gets a little bit more finite in some of their rules, that will kind of really tell us.
Start to tighten up the what are we looking at?
Yeah, but again, I voted for this because as a concept, and that's what I keep saying to people. Do you want any of this, right? It could be a spectrum. If you want it, yes. If you're like absolutely no, then no. Do you want the city to explore this option? That's kind of the best opinion.
And that's where I think some of the confusion is. I believe some voters think if we vote yes,
Then it's an open.
then the next day downtown is.
Yeah, somebody the other day came up to me and
That's
said,
not,
oh, the city passed the state and the city passed a law for outdoor drinking now, right? And this was before it even came to the city. They were just saying that the law got adopted, signed together. I was like, nope,
Civics.
nope.
no, you'll have a bad experience if you do that
Yeah,
right
I was
now.
like, nope, nope.
We don't know enough about it. That's the problem. Like, does it have to be? Do you have to designate areas of the city that
You
you're
do.
going to do it?
Yes, so that stuff
You
is
can't move it
covered.
around or something like that.
That
But you could designate multiple areas of
Correct.
the city.
So
you
you
could
could say-
designate a one-day. The example, if anyone went to Westival a
Yes.
couple of weeks ago, they
Yeah.
Load Question expanded their liquor license to include the whole parking lot, and the whole
Private property.
and it was private property. That's true. But next year, Louis will be open next door, and if Louis wanted to also have a liquor presence there, they can't expand their footprint into the same footprint that Loaded is in. But the two of them, but there could be, as I understand it, am I getting this right? The two of them could have a one-day social district,
well,
and both use the same square footage.
so that's a
Except
little
it's private
different.
property.
So this is a little different, and this is where we want to make sure we're not like crossing. There are one-day event liquor licenses.
Oh, so maybe that's what that is.
So Westival and things like Westival or BIPOC Fest or some of these kind of one-off events go through a completely separate process. So this,
Process.
what?
It's a parallel process.
It's a parallel
very,
process.
Very similar.
Yeah, yes, it's a parallel process.
Okay.
Thanks. That's
So that
what-
wouldn't
would
be a social district because it's private property.
Correct, but you could say, again, there are very clear rules that the state has put in, like barricades and certain things that now administratively the Liquor Commission is going through. You could say we have a social district in the West End, right? And we delineate from where, say, Profile and Imaging Arts is to Sherwin-Williams, we'll just say that, and that on certain days and at certain time periods it is allowed. So maybe as that is kind of evolving into more of an arts area with the growth of the Button Factory and the revitalization of those buildings over near Louis, at certain times on certain days within these parameters. The things that we are not 100% sure of, which will determine what the Liquor Commission administratively starts to do this. Well, what is a barricade? What is, if at all, increased police presence? What is, blah, blah. Or another example is art around town, right? So you could say we have some type of removable barricade, X, Y, and Z. Again, that is where we are waiting for the Liquor Commission to kind of come down and say, this is acceptable, this is not, this and this. You could say on the first Friday of every month, from 5 to 7, because this is a delineated, area, right? We've decided that downtown could be a social district, commercial alley or Market Street, and then the city can, as I'm interpreting it written now, the city can say, okay, during these time periods, we will allow it in our social district. So it's very much not a free-for-all situation. And I think that is what people's fear is. But again, I compare it to Savannah. Savannah's not a free-for-all situation either. There are delineations of, and I walked outside of one and so and was like, hey, that stays over here. Like I started walking into the more historic part of
Right,
Savannah,
right,
away
yeah.
from like downtown, and they were like there was nobody doing it. So
Vince, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. I think that the idea of waiting 2 years to vote on it seemed uncomfortable, I think.
it's all
It would be
Why do you
hanging
think
there.
that?
Why didn't you do that?
Because it has to be a general election. So it's
Well,
this
if you-
November
you're voting
or,
on
so
something that you don't know anything about.
Yeah, well,
it'd
that's
be
the
November
problem
of
I have with
that is, well,
27.
that is, we discussed that. That is a problem.
Do you want to
It's-
paint City Hall? Yeah. Well, what color or what do you know? I mean, you just don't know, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
That's right, but
just my personal opinion.
I think it's a bit like zoning, but for events. Do you want to have these types of things in this area and create designations for them? The question I would have if you talk to any other municipalities is what is the cost offset as far as like barrier support, inspection support, policing support? Like I would be interested, if we do study this, if it passes, that we have a similar recommendation to what we had for outdoor dining, where we identify or have the fee committee identify some sort of a structure for this so that it becomes cost neutral or appropriate for the city.
And maybe that would be part of what we give to count, part of our document.
of course, I asked at council meeting if the state is planning on funding this too.
What answer did you get?
That's the expected answer. And, so also, I think there are liability issues that both the restaurants and the city deal with on that too. So there's so many questions that what I thought about with this is that this may bring a lot of people out to vote in November.
That's true.
You know, one way or another. So maybe that's good. But I think it's all premature. But I think I agree with the assistant mayor that it's better to get it on the ballot and see where we're going. If it's voted down, then it saves a lot of work for a lot of people. If it's not, if it's voted in, then we know what we have to do. And I don't know. There are a lot of questions to be answered, that's all.
Yeah, this conversation parallels and almost is identical to the conversation we had at the Chambers Board. And where we came down to is very similar to the position the assistant mayor just shared, where we think there is a pathway to doing this in an ethical and responsible way. And so the question really becomes now, and the question before the voters really right now, what's going on the ballot is essentially, do you want this conversation to continue? Right? Do you want to be able to explore this as an option? No one's saying we have to do it as a city. Is do we want to have the opportunity to do this as a city, and can we explore that opportunity? If you say no, then the conversation's over. It's dead in the water for 2 years. If you say yes, then we can form this committee, we can explore it, we can see if we can find the right set of ingredients to make the right sauce to make it work here in Portsmouth, and then we have the opportunity to move that forward. Council would have the opportunity to move that forward. There'd be public comment, and there'd be lots of opportunities for that. So that's where we landed as a chamber, is that we think the conversation should continue, and that we would love to see it. Not love, but that's a strong word. We prefer get a positive yes. That conversation can continue. That's it. Boil it down. That's the simplest version that I can come up with.
I find it interesting. I mean, NovaCare, I think Vaughan Mall might just be a place that be designated.
It's a good
you know?
spot.
Who knows?
Seems
But-
logical, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not right now.
Not right now.
Well, I think
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, all
Well, I
right,
think
one
that's-
at a time, one at a time.
I was just gonna ask if there's gonna be some sort of education thing about because I can get into the voting booth tomorrow or on November and be like, I have no idea what this is. I'm gonna vote no on it. So I don't know if the chamber.
Well, that's what we're saying, is that this feels like we should be more of a voter education of what you just said. This is, do you want the conversation to continue? And
Yeah,
have
we don't have a lot of
city-
time to inform people about what it actually is if it's this November, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So.
4 weeks from now.
We are planning a public comment.
Public
or
comment is-
comments and
It's Monday, right?
questions. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's why.
that's why we have to do this today.
Because we have to report out on this on Monday night, so. Let me just, I want to continue to take questions, but I just wanted to respond to Bob's concept of wait to see what it looks like. As I read this law, even after the Liquor Commission comes out with its regulations, the concept is not locked or etched in stone, so to speak, because the city council can, once they're authorized to do it, and there's a simple question on the ballot, that is, are you in favor of social districts in the city of Portsmouth? It's not, let's say 2 years from now, are you in favor of a social district that looks like this and all these little components? The question is very specific and you're not allowed to add to it. You could do a voter guide or something, but every year the city council can come back and change the terms of the social district, can move the social district somewhere, can say it only can occur after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There are various things. So I fall in the same category of those who think that people should vote on this dialogue, so to speak, whether to continue it. But I don't think you can come into this with the idea that people are going to vote on what the final product looks like. And that may be an issue with some voters who are concerned about alcohol in the streets or something. But I want to get back to him, but let me just, so I think for purposes of Monday night and what we're doing here today is that we can come to this public forum and add to the public's understanding of how this has worked in other communities, because nothing I've read in the press or heard on social media or anything, and people have said, this is what it looks like in Savannah, or this is what it looks like in Asheville, North Carolina. There are some people who say, well, I don't want it to look like Bourbon Street in New Orleans on a Friday night. But we've done, that sort of preliminary research by contacting people as to how this has worked in a positive way in different communities. So that's where we can add to the dialogue that's going to occur on Monday night. As Ann said, it's an educational function. I think the idea of, we think there ought to be a blue ribbon committee or what after the fact. I think we should offer to assist the city if the voters approve the concept of helping design what it would look like, what perfect recipe is for Portsmouth after the fact. But I think for us to start saying this is how you ought to go about doing it, et cetera, is just not going to help the voters that much. That's just my thought. So, and
Well, I had a thought.
it's gone. You're still back where the draft is drafty.
Oh, it's so,
Now,
I needed
does
to
that
put
mean
words on paper, so.
Does that mean it's frothy or that it's breezy? So.
Well,
It's supposed to be drafty.
felt like a lot of this probably wasn't necessary to go to council, but was helpful for this group. So this isn't really meant to be a council-ready document.
Yeah.
Draft.
And we may not have a council-ready document, but I think we have to at least have a council-ready presentation on Monday night. And I've set aside the evening on my calendar to report out. So the question is, what do we report out? And maybe we can agree on this and revise this draft as necessary before Monday, but
I think one of the most important things, if we're thinking about voter education or resident education, is listing out some of the cities that you've done a little research on. So to remove some, how some people think it's Nashville, some people think it's this, just saying like, here are some towns, communities, cities, that actually do this, that are not Key West and not Burbank
Like, I
Street.
think Asheville,
Asheville, North Carolina, no, they don't do it, no,
I provided in materials for my board, I provided some examples from other cities. So I provided
Yeah.
a large one like Savannah, and
Yeah.
then there was a city like Norman, I think this was a city in North Carolina that I chose that had a very small, that was centered around like basically their version of the music hall.
Yeah.
And it was like the block around that, and that's it. It was like very tight and controlled. So there are plenty of examples we can pull out there. And there's examples of like what the branding looks like and the sign saying not in the store, in the store,
Yeah.
all this. So we can pull some of those examples together. It's pretty easy.
I would recommend for the presentation, starting with the fact that it's a concept, like anchor to that, and then identify future considerations that you'd ask the council to consider, all the things we talked about, the timing, the location, the permitting, all of those sort of things, and just anchor back to the concept with a recommendation that we think that the city should explore it, but that there needs to be due diligence on the other side to define what it means. I think that's really the best that we can do.
And is that directed toward the council or the public?
I think it's both. I think it's both. To the council, we recommend that you consider these items, and to the public, it is our recommendation that should this pass, that the council will consider these items.
I guess another tricky piece to it is that we're trusting the council to do the right thing if we vote yes, but we actually don't know who that council will be.
That's
So there's
always,
also that.
Go through that every 2 years.
But it will be very specific, we
And that's-
we vote yes in November, and 8 weeks later, it's being implemented by, right now, an unknown entity, group of people.
And every 2 years.
And every 2 years,
Revised, so,
it could be
yeah.
doing fabulously, but a new group comes in, and it is all based on councils controlling how it's happening. Yeah. So you need to trust your council. Vote well.
Well, and the population could vote in favor and the council could decide not to have.
That's right.
that is true.
It could run for a month, and the council said, we don't like this, and it's gone.
This was part of the conversation at City Council when discussing this with Attorney Farini is the legal terminology that they're putting is like may allow, which I think it's may, which also says that legally, which kind of also infers could not allow.
Yeah.
So it's you know what I mean? And there's been a lot of conversations obviously that after the parade last year, kind of what was happening and what happened kind of in that hearth alleyway of like an after parade thing. There's lots of options and conversations, but you're right that like the council could say it was a slim margin, we'll explore it, but like we're not gonna set it in place right now. Or another option is they could say it was a slim margin, we'll explore it for 2 years and then maybe see what happens.
I just want to say, just if anyone doesn't know this yet, I will not be part of that next council.
Smart.
You'll just be a regular voter.
I'll be the new Esther Kennedy.
We love involved residents.
All right, so is this a starting point for what we're gonna, what are we saying here?
I mean, do we want to include our thoughts of here's some areas where it might be, or is that us making a step too far? Do we want to even?
I would frame
Suggest.
everything as the council, should this pass, should consider the following options and just put ideas out there so that it's very clear these might be our recommendations, but ultimately these are the types of decisions that the council will have to make. I don't think we're in a position to make any hard recommendations from the EDC, given
No, I don't know.
it's defined.
I just think it's good for voters to be aware of how many choices there'll be.
Yes.
I mean, I was intrigued, not that I'm saying this is what Portsmouth would do, but I was intrigued. There was a little town in North Carolina that have a social district every Saturday from 12 to 5. Because their downtown is dead, but everybody comes at dinner time to go out to the restaurants. So they just did 12 to 5 to stimulate the downtown. At 5 o'clock it ends, and then everybody goes in the restaurants. So they analyzed where their town needed a little economic boost and just plugged it right in there.
The neighborhood conversations for walking the dog have been, is this gonna make Portsmouth into New Orleans? I think that's just like the
That's what
public
I-
perception.
Yes, and that's what I would love to have the EDC put something out so that people do understand this is not New Orleans. This could be as simple as every year after the Christmas parade, there's a whatever that is, 2 hours or 3 hours while the streets shut down. It's a party in the street for 3 hours, and then that's it till next Christmas. It could be as quiet, as silent as that.
We
to one
effectively
day.
tested that last year just without the alcohol. We left
Right,
it there.
yes. As a shop, it was called
As a
Shopping
shopper.
Street.
Shoppers.
Shopper, right, yeah. And then at the same time, Hearth was doing it as a
Yes.
beer garden, but that's different. That's private property. They will be,
Private property.
well,
It's not private
okay, that's a, but
It's
they,
public.
They had a special, they went through the event.
They say they got their permissions in place.
did.
Oh,
And
yeah.
my understanding is they're intending to do that again this year with the new tenant. But
They haven't applied yet, but right. But that was a use of the community space that needed, and then since it's public space, we had to adjudicate how it would be used.
But let me just, we're tossing around the idea of having these barriers, but I don't think there's anything in this act that requires barriers.
So
we don't know that.
we don't know. That would be in the rules that we have not seen yet and probably won't see realistically till January.
Beyond January.
Yeah,
It will,
I mean,
it will take the
at
liquor
least-
I was
commission,
told spring.
probably 6 months to do, but the act itself doesn't require, it just requires signs, posting the hours and having the liquor commission, the police department. So I'm concerned about leaving an impression with people that there are gonna be things there that aren't there. So
I'm thinking about addressing what Jacob said. If I don't know enough, I'm just gonna vote no. And this doesn't mean I support this or I don't support it, but I like the idea of painting conceptual, either painting conceptual pictures for people or dispelling conceptual myths. This doesn't have to be a large geographical area. It can be a very tightly prescribed place and time, responding to a particular economic development or revitalization need, and then sort of leave it at that. I think beyond that, we're just grasping at straws. I think it's our responsibility to point out what we know it is and is not at this point, and stop.
I'm seeing a Christmas market in Von Mall, and you can have mulled cider, mulled wine.
Well, I like this Norman, I think, is it Norman, North Carolina, that has the
12 to 5.
12 to 5 one
I don't
day.
remember. I'd have to pull my
But
notes.
it's a good
Well,
example.
that was
of-
interesting.
So my analogy is this is really an enabling act. It's like zoning. The state, authorizes or enables communities to create zoning laws, but it doesn't tell you, unless you get to certain things, what they look like. And that's what this is portraying. So to the extent that I'm a voter and I'm going to listen to or be at Monday night's hearing for purposes of educating myself, I'm not going to know anything about these other communities unless I've traveled to one of them by chance or some friend has come back from Mardi Gras. And so I think it's important to be able to say, this is, you can't predict what this is going to look like because it's going to be designed after you say, go ahead and design it. If you don't like it at that point, then you go back to your city council, as we do on zoning laws, and you say, we want to change it. So it is an educational thing. So the question is can this serve as a primer for this educational process? Or what else should be in it, or what should be deleted from it, or? But it seems to me that what makes us unique as sort of a board whose jurisdiction is to consider economic development issues, particularly from the perspective of the business community, is we can say we've looked at other communities in other states that have authorized this, and the result is a lot of variety and a whole spectrum on which these things can be designed, including having very specific control designs. We've polled business people within the community, and while there's a mixed response because no one knows exactly what it's going to look like, there's a more positive than negative response to the concept. We've talked to the Liquor Commission and the Fire Department and the sponsor of the bill, et cetera, and no one is saying you can't do this no matter what because it's going to be too hard to do. The couple things that I had, we had talked about, or you had referenced in your last month's draft, was I think had someone talked to the other communities in New Hampshire who are pursuing this, like Concord or?
Yeah, I've been in communication with Concord. I also had a conversation with Littleton. Those are the two that I know of. I've talked to a few other communities that are not considering it. Don't think Hampton wants to add to the chaos. Sorry, did I say that?
You did.
Can't take it back.
So I guess what's the what's the flavor of the debate that's taking place in those communities?
I think Concord's a very aligned conversation than what we're having here. I think they're in a very similar position. I think they are definitely in a period of investment and trying to re-engage their downtown community and bring that vibrancy back. And there's been a lot of great work done in that city to really showcase the arts, and they're on like a great trajectory right now. And I think they're looking at how can this be part of that solution. Whereas I think Portsmouth is in a slightly different position, as in we're already pretty bustling, and it's already kind of happening. Does this take away from what's already going on? And I think that's the little bit of the difference that we have. When the conversation I have with Littleton, they're thinking a very big footprint there. At least they were. I don't know if they still are. But they're kind of thinking like downtown wide, which is not a big space, but it's much bigger than I think what we would consider here in Portsmouth.
Okay. Do you think?
Question for Ben. Do you know of any, maybe it's the North Carolina towns, do you know of any that took it away or shrank the footprint or it didn't go well?
I don't know.
Nothing popped up for
Nothing
that
popped up to me,
when I was-
but I did not do like a search for like removing the social district. Maybe that's a good Google search to sift through. But I know some communities waited on it. Asheville's a good example of that. I think they're starting the process now there, but they weren't part of the first wave. But they were also dealing with a flood and everything else. So.
I also think Santa Monica is an interesting one because they just started it this year, and they're one of the only ones that I found that require bracelets. So when you're getting your first beverage, it shows that like someone was ID'd. So when you're getting your first beverage from that from a restaurant, that restaurant IDs you, and there's like bracelets that then go on your arm with like so that other places know that you, and also enforcement wise no. And they're the only ones that I saw that did something like that.
Okay, but again, now we're trying to design the
Yeah.
the concept, and I don't think we're ready for that. So, I'm not hearing specific suggestions, so let me just frame it this way. This is the recommendation of the working group.
I have a suggestion, and
Which
I can,
edits?
I can take the action to look at this. I think we need to start with leading with the fact that this is a concept. We should talk about the options available, targeted, time-based, a tool to support economic development. The third section is we should talk about the feedback we've received from the community, from the chamber, from other New Hampshire towns, and any other feedback we want to include. The fourth item, we should include recommendations for the council should it pass from the voters in November. And then we should end with the EDC position that we do or do not recommend that this go forward. I don't think we've all, as a body here, stated our support for this as a concept. We're talking about it, but I haven't heard, I don't know if we need to take a vote. Do we agree that
We're
we
gonna
should
take a
endorse
vote.
it?
Yeah. Is that a motion?
I can. I mean, would you want me to move that we endorse and support the motion on the question on the ballot in November? Or are we making a motion for what we represent to council on Monday?
Well, I think both,
Okay,
and they can be separate.
okay. I move that we call to a vote as to whether the members of the EDC support voting yes to the concept of.
So you're asking how we're gonna vote.
No, I'm asking, do we recommend this concept for the city of Portsmouth as an economic tool? Yes
Which
or
is
no?
what we're voting on in November, so that's kind of a weird thing to ask.
We are asked to come to the council with a position from the EDC. How can anyone represent the EDC's
Should the
position? We haven't
EDC
taken
recommend,
consent.
not you, so you might want no, but you might think the
I don't
EDC
care,
should
but I'm
vote.
just saying,
yeah.
it's just kind of odd that you.
No, it's
Would
not
you like to
odd.
do it by secret
All right, if
ballot?
you, so just make sure we frame it correctly, I guess. How are you
Go
voting?
right
So
ahead,
what
go
is the
right ahead.
motion?
If you have a recommendation, go ahead.
Well, I guess if we're, it would be an EDC recommend.
Yep.
Recommend. Do you think the EDC should recommend social districts?
Yes.
Okay.
Recommend social districts to look into as a concept, not that we're recommending to actually implement them, but that we're looking into as a concept.
Yes.
Yeah, well, although we don't want to call it, recommend they look into the concept. The question I think that you're suggesting is that the EDC supports the adoption of this concept by the voters.
Would it, and I'm gonna kind of wordsmith, should it say, that the EDC recommends the following initial guidelines should this be passed on the ballot, or, should this, be voted for in favor, at the municipal election? Because if it's not voted in favor, then, none of it all kind of goes away.
And if we're not all in favor of it, then standing up there and making any recommendations is pointless.
Yeah.
Like, do we agree in concept that the city should explore this as the Economic Development Commission?
I think the question should start with should the vote in November go forward with an affirmative than that question.
Yeah, that's a much better way of.
Well, say that again.
In other words, there's a qualifier at the beginning of the question that should
Should the voters pass whatever referendum that is on the ballot, right? Then the EDC recommends the city council take the following steps in initiating the process of.
Okay, but
Wants us
I
to-
think,
That's very different
Before
from
that.
what you.
but I think what Sarah is proposing, the first thing, that's the second part, but the first thing is, does the EDC support the adoption of
The ballot
social
question.
districts
That's a concept.
in the city of Portsmouth? In other words, do the voters want to enable the city council to create a social district, one or more social districts in the city, without knowing what they're gonna look like?
Do you feel like that's hard because the city council's already voted to put it on the ballot?
No, no.
Okay.
No, because
no,
if we
but more
don't, if
importantly-
we as a body don't believe that this is a good thing for the city, then I don't personally feel like we have any business standing up and speaking on behalf of it in Monday's meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get that. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but plus, what you said earlier in your first comment, and what I heard at the city council meeting was, a number of the councilors said, I am supportive of this because I think the voters have a right to vote. What I haven't heard the city council say is, we endorse this concept and ask the voters to vote.
There was only one who was saying that.
Yeah, well, so that's, so my, again,
I get what you're saying there.
yeah, so I don't wanna have us twist ourselves in knots here, but, and the answer to this may be no, but I think we should be able to answer the question is, does the EDC support the creation of social districts in the city of Portsmouth? In other words,
I think that's a heavy lift for the
It's a
EDC.
very heavy one. Because I feel like my answer is it depends.
It depends.
well, so then you're against the vote?
Can I direct back to the way Sarah framed editing the document? If it were targeted, time restricted, based on an economic development or revitalization.
As a tool for economic development.
Right. So rather than do we, how about would we? If the voters pass this, would we, given those parameters? Or maybe you say we're not gonna vote until the voters vote.
I think it's okay to go back to, I think, and I apologize. I think it's important, and he's fully within this, right, that this request came from the mayor and not the full city council. So I think it's okay to whether it's at the meeting to say, hey, we have discussed some options. We kind of put together this little bit of a voter, what we consider a resident guide or a little bit of an overlay from the EDC, but we are not ready to take a stance on this. I think that, in my opinion, as a counselor, if that happened on Monday, I would say that's okay because I don't have a full stance on it. So I personally think that's okay. I understand if everyone doesn't, because I think, to me, what I'm saying is that as a council, I did not vote to ask for EDC recommendation yet fully. So I think that is a line that you can teeter. Yes, the mayor did ask this body, but the council did not specifically send a request saying, we need you guys to do this right now. And for me, I, at the meeting, said, should this pass, then I think we would refer it to the EDC and other bodies to make a committee.
Okay.
Part of the discussion and vote on September 24th was, in moving this forward, required an additional public hearing. So Monday night will include a public hearing for anyone to comment. And perhaps EDC comments during that public comment, sharing whatever it is you want, versus a formal vote endorsement report back.
John? I think, this is a lot of good information. And I think we can provide this information and survey information to the city council without necessarily taking a stand. You can say, this is what we have heard from the community, this is what we think it looks like, these are, some potential positive aspects of it. Maybe there's negative aspects, I don't know, we haven't seen any, but I think just having this information should be somewhat helpful to the council without us saying, we must have the social district.
And perhaps the way Sarah's suggesting to reformat it,
Yeah, right.
which is very logical,
And
or logical in this.
I was being provocative in asking us to take a stand, but perhaps what we lead with is that it's premature to take a definitive stand, but these are the items that we explored as a result of our working
Yeah.
group, and leave it at that.
And there's value in the work that
Yes.
you all did that we can bring forth to the public for consideration.
So I think we're providing information for the council to make a decision. So,
No, the council doesn't make the decision. Council done making the decision, right?
yeah.
It's 9
to put it
votes.
on the ballot, that's the only thing.
Yeah,
is
it's the only
put it
thing.
on the ballot.
Yeah.
That's all they can do right now.
That's all they can do. So again, this is a public session for people to express
So we
how they
can,
feel about the,
In line with Keno and Games of Chance.
Yeah,
if they, if the legislature had passed a bill that said any city or town in the state of New Hampshire could repeal or could enact its own prohibition against the sale of alcohol, would you take a position on that?
You mean
do you mean?
individually or as an EDC? Are you being provocative?
I'm looking for some decisiveness here.
I think we have a lot of information here.
Well, yeah, okay, all right, well, the short answer is no. This is what I'm hearing, but, so Sarah's original provocative motion was that, we would, after explaining what what we found out and reporting out on that we would say the EDC supports the ballot question. It supports a positive adoption of the possibility of social district in Portsmouth.
Yeah, I think
And I'm hearing
certainly
no.
we want it on the ballot. So that people can.
It's already.
It's already on the ballot, so
That's right, it already
that's
is.
not an issue.
He's asking, does the EDC say yes to social districts?
Why do
No,
we
Tom.
have to say yes or no?
Because Tom wants us to.
Well, because that was what Sarah's motion was.
All right, I'll
And you
withdraw,
seconded it.
I'll withdraw the motion. So can I make another?
No, Bob seconded it.
That's how they tackle it.
All right,
If you
so,
wanted to formally disagree
all
with
right, the
me.
motion is withdrawn. We're gonna
Okay.
start, but look, and maybe, I'm happy to just go around the table and instead of debating this issue, because it's, we're eating into Andy's time at this point. Let's just, in some ways, this must have been the same debate Ben had at his board table, which is whether the chamber should endorse having social districts in the city. If the answer is we're not prepared to endorse social districts, but we're here as an educational, aid, then let's just say that. But let's see if we can get off the dime. Is there support for? If a motion is made, is there support for the EDC endorsing the adoption of social district in the city of Portsmouth? Just give me a yes or a no. All right, we'll go around the table. Ben?
to support the EDC, say it again.
The idea is that the ED, at the end of, as a result of its investigation, the EDC is prepared to say it supports the adoption of social districts in the city of Portsmouth.
At the end of the vote?
No, are we saying we would support the vote, a positive vote in November?
Well, I would,
Yes or no?
Should it be exploration or adoption? Because those are two different things. We could examine it and then at the end of the examination, decide it's not the right thing.
Well, all right, so we're
if you would say, does it support just on the, without any other further information than the vote, I would say no.
It depends.
it depends, okay.
I understand that the question was posed, but I guess my question is why? Why do we have to send? I know I'm circling back to it, but I think as a counselor, I have not put the EDC in this position to make a firm stance yet. So I guess my question is, why are we doing it? Versus just kind of what people have said, just sending the information on, I guess is my question.
You know, I agree with that.
As a counselor, I'm not asking, we did not make a vote to ask the EDC to do this yet. But the information the EDC has gathered would be beneficial to get on the public record in the city council format. So I guess that's where.
Okay, so that's your position.
So that's a no, I guess, isn't it? I mean, to that yes and no question.
All right, well, let's continue to get the quick feel, because I don't want to spend a bunch of time debating this if we don't have.
What did the mayor ask us to opine on? He specifically say, find out if the EDC supports or doesn't support. This was back in July or June. It's a long
It
time.
was when this whole thing came down, I don't think we even had the bill at that point.
No.
And so, he wanted us to look into it and to poll the business community as to their support for it. Because that's, I think he believes the EDC is like a window into the business community.
We've done that.
Done that.
We've looked into it and polled the business community, and we're ready to share what we've found.
All right, so your answer is no, is that? I'm just simply asking for a yes or no.
I know, that's the hard part.
Okay, I guess it's a no.
All right, and we know what you think. Right? Want to clarify it?
I say no,
Okay.
only because I think it's just odd that I'm gonna go to the voting booth and vote yes or no, except I've already voted. You know, it's just weird.
Well, that's a different issue altogether. You don't want to go public with what you might
I don't
vote.
really care, but I think it's just odd to ask that. And I think it's better for us to be informational at this point, as opposed to saying, we think you should vote this in.
Okay, so, Jacob?
No.
Same?
I don't get a vote, so. Passing laws right there.
Can we put that under mine?
You can't take a position?
I will say the position of the chamber is that we think there is the potential for an ethical and responsible way to do this, and therefore we would like the opportunity to continue the conversation. That is the position of the chamber. We think that there is a pathway. We would like to have the opportunity to explore to see if we can find that pathway. That's our position.
Can the EDC also not have that, a similar path? Do we have to say yes or no? We think that's what it's
The
doing?
conversation should continue.
That's our
Conversation should
stance.
That's
continue.
why
Conversation should
exploration.
I like
So-
the exploration.
It's not
So
yes or
we
no.
do support
We're
a
in
yes
favor
vote.
of-
Not yes or no, it's, this conversation should
That's
continue.
fine.
And in order to continue the conversation, you need a yes vote. That's our position.
All right, well, okay. Andy?
I'm a yes, but I want to say why I'm saying yes. I just have a lot of faith, even though we're going into a new council, a lot of faith in the city's ability to examine this. If you've ever been to the zoning board or planning board meetings in the city and sat through those sessions, this is not going to get fast-tracked. This isn't going to be shoved down the city residents' throats. This is going to be under a magnifying glass, and I think a lot of Joanna's comments I really appreciated too, and I have been to some of those towns. So anyways, that's why I'm saying yes.
Okay.
I vote, my position is yes, we should be in a position to explore options related to the social districts enforcement.
But it sounds like the nays have it, so, okay.
Well, you didn't vote.
How did the chair vote?
Well,
Hey, Tom Watson, and Sarah, I'm here as well, and really good discussion and obviously a challenging set of circumstances to be in, given timing and some uncertainty. But going back to Sarah's point about this being an economic tool we would want to have in the toolbox, I would be a yes, subject to obviously residents' support and voting in favor of continuing the exploration and obviously having faith, as Andy said, in the city and being able to administer, but having it at the discretion of the city. But I would rather have it as a tool than not, so would endorse it subject to, typical ability to enforce and come up with adequate parameters, but would want the conversation to continue. So I'd be a yes in that spirit.
Okay, great, thank you.
That's phrasing it a little bit different than you were throwing at us.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's the whole point, it's really, how far does this board want to go? And
Can we say it could be a positive economic, positive on the, from an economic development standpoint, we feel this could be a positive,
It's right here in Ann's document.
Yes.
We believe the concept of a social district with thoughtful regulations put in place by the city council could potentially benefit the business community in downtown Portsmouth.
that's what I was,
That I
I
support.
support this document.
that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I feel
It's-
like-
It's already, yes.
Of Sarah's explored.
That's not what I was asked.
That's right, I was asking a different question than that.
All right, so, let me just go
Like a
back.
yes, but.
And at this point, I need a motion from somebody, and I'd like it, if possible, to be based upon this document, if not as exactly drafted, but because I don't think we're gonna have time to redraft another one before Monday night. And so,
Can this be edited and circulated?
I don't know.
Can we vote that way?
No, you can't do it electronically.
well, Sarah, you
The problem
have
is you have
pretty
right to
much-
know law stuff if you start circulating and having a conversation.
Well, can we vote on what we would like? Like, I like the way that you phrased the edits, the order you would put it. You're taking kind of this
4.0.
information, but organizing it a little better.
I did too. I thought that was a great way to. The one thing to add to that, in order, if the locations could be deleted, I would be in favor of
So I
that.
wasn't sure, like, do we want,
Yeah,
is that
I
in the
think that's-
weeds?
A good idea.
Automatically
Yeah,
drawing
that's what- that's like
emotional
The new Sarah's gonna pick that up
to this.
from that.
But anyways, the 4 points that Sarah outlined 10 minutes ago, I thought were great.
So do we want one motion or two motion?
I'd like one motion.
Okay.
If possible.
So I
Whatever.
think the single motion should be the sentence that, I don't have it right in front of me, that Ben read from the document. Does the EDC support the rest of the sentence?
What you mean from this
We
document?
believe that the concept of a social district.
Yes.
I would vote yes to that.
That's what I was trying to ask her.
As I wrote.
Trying to find,
It's,
you just read it, Ben, which one was it?
we believe that it's the short paragraph in the middle
Lines.
there. We believe that the concept of a social district with thoughtful regulations put in place by the city council could potentially benefit the business community in downtown Portsmouth.
Yeah.
All right. Is that,
How about that?
all right,
vote
so
yes.
that's our conclusion. All right? All right, so is there a second to that, adopting that? Okay, we got a second.
Motion?
Sarah.
Yes.
Sarah.
Do you want me to say it?
No,
Okay.
I got it.
You got it. All right, so, any further discussion on that? Hearing none?
Change the word could to may.
Could, may potentially
May.
benefit?
Is there a significance to that change?
Shorter.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just asking, why are you making a change? What, just for clarification?
It's a little less positive.
May
more
or may
tentative.
not.
I like could.
Yeah. Well, that's your motion. Do I hear a second to that motion?
I guess not.
Guess not. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna call the question on that as our sort of bottom line position with our report, all right? Are we clear on that? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it.
There we
Okay.
go.
There we go.
Wordsmithing.
All right, so that will serve as our conclusion, and then you want to have the second part of your motion?
Yes, I move that we take the information in the document prepared by the working group and structure it to include 4 areas. 1, anchor to the social district concept. 2, identify the options for social districts. I think you already have it in here, but targeted, time-bound, and a tool available for economic development. 3, include feedback gathered from the community and
From the business
from the
community?
business community, other New Hampshire towns, residents, and anyone else surveyed by the working group. And then 4, include high-level recommendations for consideration by the council should the vote pass in November.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that?
What's the mechanics of this? Today's Friday.
I can,
You'll the packet as late as Monday at noon or 1 or something, so it can be submitted as public comment.
Sarah and Ann getting their
yeah,
heads
if
together.
it's okay, I can work with Ann on it.
Okay, all right, so you two will try to work something out, and if you include me in on that.
Should it be approved by the voters at first? Should,
We'll circulate the document.
yeah, okay, but I just think, should this be approved by the voters, then this is what we would do.
Yes, recommendation should it pass, that's in
Yeah,
there.
Should it pass? Yeah.
Okay, and we're taking out the list of communities?
That's the recommendation.
I mean, not communities, the list of areas?
Areas,
yes.
Okay,
Don't want to get into that discussion yet.
yeah, no, I agree. I think that was a good comment by Andy. All right, so any further comment on that motion? All right, all in favor of Sarah's second motion as presented, indicate by saying aye.
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 You opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. So our working step from here is that Sarah and Ann will get together and come up with a revised draft. And then, I guess, we can circulate it, but we can't have a conversation online about it. So I would simply ask if you have comments, you send them directly to them, not to the entire.
No reply alls.
Just, when you send it out with everybody as a blind copy, and that way they can't circulate the entire group. And then, I'll be prepared to get this to the city for inclusion in the city council's packet, and I will also attend the city council meeting on Monday night, not to repeat everything in there, but to sort of reinforce and answer any questions. All right, Vince, you were gonna say something?
Well, a blind copy is still a quorum. So I just wonder if it should come from Sean.
Doesn't allow for a reply all.
All right, just clarification on that. If that's the rule, then I guess if the two of you could send the draft, when do you think you'll be sending it out, over the weekend?
As soon as I get out of this meeting.
You say you're gonna get out sooner than you think. All right, so, if you can do it.
Yeah, by the end of the day today.
All right, so if you can get it to Sean so he can send it out,
Yep.
and then that will take care of the right to know thing? Okay, all right.
Am I right on that?
It doesn't create a quorum because it doesn't allow for the ability to reply all. If
It's really.
okay.
the
Well, then
chair
that's all right.
BCCs everyone, you just write back to the chair.
Okay, all right. Then never mind.
Yeah, it's really, you can't have a debate or
Yeah.
exchange of
Okay.
comments on it. Okay. All right, so let's finish that. So that leaves us with a lot of time for Andy.
You'll get him time.
Fortunately, and I allowed us to, I really wanted to get this social district thing down because of the time constraints, but we're not absolutely pressed in the same way for our comments on the master plan. In fact, I want to Ann an opportunity to explain the conversations she's had with UTIL about this. And so I don't think we're gonna adopt or resolve your proposal today, but I do want you to report out on how you got there. And then I have a thought as to how we can get this thing home by the next meeting. But let's start with, Ann, tell us about your conversation with the UTIL on this.
I sometimes log into the city staff meetings with UTIL. I have my own little update thing, but we only talk about my piece of the world when we're on that call. So on the city staff one, we talked about input from committees and commissions such as us. And the process right now with the master plan is that UTIL is putting together a draft. They're using the 10, I'm going to call them master plans, but they're not all master plans. Market Square Plan, Bicycle Ped Plan, Climate Action, etc. Those 10 plans, as well as all the public comment that we've gathered all summer and the comment from the meeting on September 15th in the Levinson Room. They're using all of that to write their first draft. And that draft they expect to have out by the second or third week of November. That draft they will be sending to committees and commissions that are affected by the master plan. So they'll be sending that draft to the EDC, to the Sustainability Committee. They will probably not be sending it to the Cemetery Committee. They'll pick the committees that are relevant, which is not quite all of them, but most of them. They'll ask the EDC, these commissions and committees, to give comment on that draft for inclusion. And I think I should have gotten a date for that, but that's going to be January or February that they're looking at, because they're expecting that mid-November till after New Year's to be a sort of a dead zone on ability to collect comment from people. So they're not expecting anything in that period. And we would meet beginning of January, and I feel like that may or may not be the meeting when we respond to that. For us, it might be the February meeting. I don't know. We'll TBD. But they're not looking for December. It's not that quick of a turnaround. So that's the process UTIL is in right now. Anything that we get to them before they write that draft, they will read and consider, but they're not requiring that in place. They're not expecting that for this first draft. They're expecting us to make smart comments after we see the draft. So if that helps the time frame on where we are with master plan.
Questions
What I know from them.
You understand that process?
Yeah, I do. In terms of length and depth and how comprehensive it is the chapter 2015-2025 master plan, is that going to be comparable?
The draft isn't written yet, so
Yeah.
no idea.
Right.
I do encourage all of you, if you weren't at the September 15th, all of their boards, 16 boards are out in the Portsmouth room collecting comment, which is almost daily being photographed. There's Post-it notes all over them, and Monty photographs and sends that on to them. So they're getting this constant stream of input from sources all over.
My sense is that you should not assume that the formatting will be in the intricacies of the questions or suggestions will be the same as 2015, because my observation is that each of these consultants kind of comes to the table with their own preferred model. 2015 doesn't look like the 2025.
Yeah, if that's your question, it will not resemble the current master plan whatsoever. For starters, that's a big giant PDF, and this one will be a website.
Right.
Let you navigate through the website.
And
Within the City of Portsmouth website, web page, I should say.
I want to give Bob a chance, but just a minute. So my original conversation with Rick Shellman was that we would have the opportunity to offer input for the economic development, either section or components throughout. It wouldn't be necessarily adopted as we draft it. It would be understood that whatever we're proposing would be incorporated into the style of the entire plan, or it could be rejected. We're not guaranteed a certain number of words or pages in the document. We're only guaranteed to be able to offer our suggestions separate from the public process. So with that in mind, and the fact that we've got about 10 minutes, so I'd like you to kind of, if you could quickly go through how your group came to the conclusions that you're recommending out of, that fairly large, detailed document that had the heat map on it. And then to the extent that there's time, I'd like people to comment on anything that's in there that they like, they don't like, or whatever. But I'm going to employ the same type of concept that we did on the social districting now, which is ask that after this meeting, people respond directly to you or to Sean without going to everybody, so we don't have an online dialogue, and then ask that based upon those comments and what you hear today, we try to have something that would be in final presentation form, no longer just a draft, but an actual recommended submission to the planning board that we could vote on in the November meeting.
And thereby probably or maybe get incorporated in that first draft.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if we vote in November, they would have it prior to their first draft.
Right.
Yeah.
Then our tricky thing, we're gonna get the draft, but then our December meeting is at the CTE and we don't have that kind of discussion.
No, but I understood you were saying that they're expecting to give us until February.
I think January or February, they didn't seem like
to
it
come
was
back.
gonna be a tight.
So we'll have
timeline.
some time, even if we don't get to do it, what's more important, I think, right now is that we get by the first week of November, whatever we want them to include.
That's right.
And they have an opportunity to add or not into their draft, and they may have already covered these issues, we just don't know. So,
And then the January meeting, this should be the primary.
and that's, and so we'll end up we'll focus on their draft in
at
the
the
January
January
meeting, not
meeting.
on our proposal. All right, so I'm sorry for not being able to give you much time, but we're now in the.
That's okay. I can be quick. And where this came from, actually, we've talked about that in previous meetings, but I'll just go over that real quick. I think the starting point for this document, and before I launch into that, apologies for the late submission, but there was comments coming in all through the week. So maybe the way to look at this document is take a look at it this weekend, this week, and with a fresh set of eyes, and then looking for comments back. But this came from from our EDC workshop, which was early 2025. It also came from looking at the 2015 master plan. It came from comments from this group and a heat map that Tom just referenced with commission feedback. There was some information that came from Charleston, North Carolina, ideas on EDC and master planning. It came from the work Bob Mahefka, Phil Cohen, and myself did in our committee, and EDC comments along the way. We just discussed the mechanics of this. The committee is looking for comments at this point on this document. When I say this document, dated October 1st. It's a 3-pager. I will highlight, in the interest of time, one of the hardest pieces of this is, and I'll cast a highlight on it, is how to measure performance. You can have great ideas, you can have great initiatives, you can update this master plan, but how do you know that those things that you're recommending or want to put energy into are performing or not performing? So when you're going through the points in this draft, please focus on that. It's the second bullet in each point. So with that, I think that's kind of the summary. Take a fresh look at this. It does look different. This is about the 4th revision of this draft. Take a fresh look at it, and you can get comments back to myself or Sean on that, and we'll go through the mechanics that we just discussed about the November meeting, et cetera.
Yeah, and we'll try to work on it earlier in the month, so we
Yeah.
can get a final draft out maybe a week ahead of the next meeting, so we're not in the same bind. I just want to make one observation. When I looked this over again yesterday, it appears that a lot of these recommendations are focused on actions of the EDC. And I think for purposes of the master plan, the focus should be on the city needs to take actions, not the EDC. Whether it gets delegated to us or some other group, the master plan shouldn't limit the enforcement or the tracking or whatever it is to the EDC. So I would just encourage your group to think about this in a broader sense. It's in some ways, when you read this, it almost looks like our work plan for the next 5 years or something, and I'm not sure that the master plan is that limiting. So, all right. Ben?
I would even broaden it further than that, like this recommendation here about incubator space, which I think is great. Fully support that. But I don't know if the city or the EDC really cares who does that. You know, if that's like UNH comes in and does that, or like the SBA, or some other entity. Like we just want it done. And so maybe it's the community. You need to think of it like as a community plan, not just like the city staff or city board plans. So
No, exactly.
I brought it further.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean, it's
UNHA, you do an incubator.
Yeah.
no, but that could be a conversation that the city could have. But I guess I'm saying we just don't want to have like we want to think of it as like getting the job done, not necessarily like that we have ownership of it.
Yeah, I mean, the city can take actions like changing.
We were thinking
zoning
the city
to allow
provides
for-
the space. I don't know who runs it, So
Well, that's
I don't think we were thinking the city would run the thing.
oh okay.
Yeah, well,
That's how I read it,
the two comments really are, look at this from a
that.
larger perspective of the city taking action, facilitating, if not actually creating or doing, that type of thing, so. All right, so I'm gonna close out that item and give our city council reps about 35 seconds.
Okay, I can.
You wanna do it?
Yeah. So, well, I was going to start with that. Really exciting that the Archive Committee is in the process of founding a nonprofit with the coalition that was started. As we talked about the social districts, the no to Keno and the no to games of chance will be on the ballot. It's no because the state law was signed into effect on the 5th of this month that now allows Keno and allows games of chance in every municipality. So those are going on the ballot. We talked about changing of, there's been a lot of conversation about some zoning changings over in kind of the North End area, the old Heineman and the Ferguson building. And so we finally feel like we came to a good compromise height-wise there. We approved the music hall to do the 23rd annual, use of public space for the 23rd annual film festival. There has been some conversation of the HDC for their zoning map changes, that it's going to go to the planning board. We reappointed some members of the EDC, yay. And then a big one is the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee brought up 4 items. A request for the council to talk to the planning board about putting parking in review for apartments of 3 or more, to modify one of the sections in our zoning that talks about applying to only houses built before 1980. That part of the zoning was written in the early 90s, so that's why we feel like that date is there. There has been no relevance to it. And then we were looking at RSA 79E, which is a tax incentive relief type thing for revitalization and for affordable housing that has been very popular in other communities. Essentially what it does is that if everything meets the criteria of that state law, it freezes the taxes where they are for a certain period. That's a flexible period. But there's very tight regulations, so we're looking for a report back from staff to see if it makes sense to go to the planning board. I feel like that might kind of be the high level.
One thing that I think is relevant to the EDC is that we referred to the planning board to rezone streets and parcels in industrial and commercial to gateway. I'm always fearful of rezoning industrial areas because we need them, and we're losing industrial areas. So, but that's going back to the planning board for that. It was just a request to submit that.
And that was the fourth item from the housing committee. So the housing committee has worked for the last 18 months to come up with a couple ideas to try to incentivize and help bring more affordable housing and below market rate housing into the community.
Okay, great. All right, we're 45 seconds over our.
Good job, Tom.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you
I love
all for
adjourning.
coming.